Happy New Year, Detroit.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, January 3rd, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, welcome all. Happy Friday. Hopefully we will send you off onto the weekend here with a nice, relaxing, kind of laid-back show a little bit. It's been very, hectic, as hectic as it can be for not a lot of news actually happening in the Tigers world, right? Like every day we just have a new rumor and a new update about Bregman or Santander or Kim or you name it, man. Like it's just every day it's something new and there's not actually anything happening. So it's just anxiety inducing. It's just like, okay, well, here's another report on why you may or may not land, a big name free agent or whatever. Like it's been exhausting. So we're going to take a step back. I wanted to do this show on Wednesday on the actual first of the new year, but there was, as I have stated, a lot of those updates for Wednesday's show. So we're doing it today on the 3rd. Tigers New Year's resolutions. We do kind of a cheesy, corny type of show like this every new year. And, I was making the list this year and I realized that it's not as much of a New Year's resolution list as it is like just kind of a wish list of what I'm hoping happens in 2025, right? Like, and I guess that's kind of just how resolutions work. Like, I am not a part of the Detroit Tigers organization, so I can't really have a resolution for, you know what I mean? Like, I can't affect what the Detroit Tigers do or don't do. So I guess that's kind of just the perspective that everybody would have going into the new year and what they want to see from the Tigers this calendar year. But, I think that this is probably, since I took over the show, pretty objectively, the best state that this organization has been in, right? Like they have a really good farm system and just went to the playoffs. Now, does that mean it's perfect and it's sunshine and rainbows every day? No, far from it, right? There is still a long way to go. This is a team that in its current state would not be like a betting favorite to make the postseason again, and would probably have a win total around 500. And they were well below 500 before a miracle kind of month and a half stretch there to end the season. So I'm not trying to make it sound like everything's perfect and we can just sit back and relax. If you have listened to me at all over the last year, you would, you're aware that that's not where my head stands as far as where this organization is currently. But when making the list of what I want to see out of the Tigers in 2025, it was easily the most positive list I think I've made since I started doing this show, which is now, gee whiz, I think I took over in 2021. So we're going on 4 years this summer will be. Well, golly, that sounds weird to say out loud. So it's, you know what I mean? Like it's good. There's good and bad here, but I feel like there's more good than there has been probably at any turn of a year. Maybe you could argue there was a lot of optimism after the 2021 season going into 2022 after signing, Erod and Javi, as funny as it sounds. And, they were going to call up Greene and Torkelson, and we're only a few games under 500 in 2021. Like, there's a lot of optimism there, but 2022 is a disaster. So I think that this is new, obviously regime, not the same regime as 2021. I think there's a lot of maybe I shouldn't say there's a lot of optimism just straight up throughout the fan base, but there is a lot more than there usually is this time of year. I will say that. The first thing that I really want to see is just a league average offense. And I know that that is not like setting the bar super high, and some of these are very big asks and some of them are not very big asks, but I want to see all of them done. And this is one that falls into the feels like it's not that big of an ask, but then you kind of look back year to year. The Tigers haven't had a league average offense in almost a decade. 2016 was the last time that the Tigers had a league average or better offense in the eyes of WRC plus, weighted runs created. And the plus just makes it a scale out of 100. So if you have an 100, you are exactly a league average offense over the course of a season. Now, the Tigers weren't even like a first half, second half team offensively either. Like they were a 96, I want to say, in the first half and a 95 in the second half and ended with a 95 overall. Like they were pretty consistent in terms of their offensive output in 2024. And it was 5% worse than league average for pretty much the entire course of the 162 game season. So I think that will that's something I really want. I really, really, really want the Detroit Tigers to just be and like I don't want to say competent. Like they were competent this year. That 5% less than league average is not terrible. They were 21st in baseball. That's still bottom 10 in the league, but it's on the cusp of breaking in to that middle of the pack caliber offense. And hopefully if they go out and the rest of the offseason here bring in some bigger names that hopefully can add to the offense, and we'll talk about more reasons that the offense could uptick as well later on in the show. You're talking about a team that could hopefully end up being again league average. I'm not asking for the world here. I'm not asking to be the Dodgers or the Yankees offensively. Like I just want to be competent, and the pitching will keep us competitive. And we can worry about building that to a higher and higher mark and raise the bar as development continues and player progression continues and whatnot. Another thing that I really want to see, and this one I'm far less confident in and is a much bigger ask, is extending Tarik Skubal. And I think that is something that most, if not all, of the fan base at this point is pretty much in lockstep with. I have a hard time believing there's too many people out there at his age and production that are anti, Tarik Skubal long term. I think it's now. Like it really is sooner or never, not sooner or later, right? Like as you get closer and closer to free agency, as you get closer and closer to him being a free agent, I should say, that number is only going to get greater and greater. You have to pounce on it now, or else he's just going to say, well, he's a Boris client. We're just going to wait and see what the open market has to offer. And not that we won't come back to the Tigers, but you're going to have to outpay everybody type of thing. So we'll see what happens with that. I really think that if it is going to happen, it has to happen in 2025, which is why it's on this list. I wasn't even really fully in favor of extending him in 2024 before the 2024 season. Obviously, the last few months I would have loved to, but pre-2024 season, I wasn't even really on board because he hadn't been healthy for a prolonged period of time in his whole career. Now, he's in his late 20s, just put together a Cy Young season and had zero injury concerns. I think that it's really is now or never. And I am hoping that the now ends up happening in the calendar year that is 2025. And if it isn't, then you better get aggressive in every other aspect, because you got 2 years of one of the best pitchers on the planet left on your team before you lose him because you won't pay him. So you might as well go all in those last 2 years that you do have him. But let's just extend the best homegrown pitcher we've had since Verlander. That sounds like a good idea. Okay, got another player I want to extend on the other side of the break, and then we will talk about individual player development, some players that I just want to see big things out of, take some steps forward. We'll talk about organizational health and kind of the farm system and whatnot, and so much more. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. It is absolutely thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but you can bet on specific stats, totals in the game, spreads. FanDuel has everything you could want and need. So just visit fanduel.com to join today. That's fanduel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we keep you in the loop and updated with all of the Tigers rumors that are swirling. It just feels like we're getting really close to a breaking point here where something has to give. We'll talk about Bregman a little bit more at the end of the show because he's part of the New Year's resolutions, which shouldn't be a surprise to too many people. Another extension I want to see in the calendar year 2025, though, is Riley Greene. And I'm very, very comfortable with this. I'm not asking you to give him 300 mil for 10 years. But this is a guy that I think you really can take advantage of the team control you have and say, look, we'll give you a pretty sizable raise for the next 3 years while you're still under team control before you're even free agent eligible. And in return, you give us the beginning chunk of your free agent eligibility years. I know it's much easier. It's much easier, goodness, to say that than it is to actually carry it out and do it. Right? Like every player is different, every agent is different, every camp is different. Who knows what Riley Greene's priorities are? I don't know him, obviously, but I do think that this is another one where the time is now, because if he goes out there in 2025 and takes that next step that we think he could and believe he can, and truly becomes that kind of bona fide all-star outfielder, middle of the bat type of threat, then middle of the lineup type of bat, then you're talking about, again, that price tag going up even more so because we're another year closer to free agency, et cetera, et cetera. It makes a lot of sense to get in on the action with him too, because next winter, right, the winter of 2025, or postseason of 2025, that I think that's going to be a big talking point. I can predict the future a little bit, not actually, but I can almost assure you that this time next year, if he is not extended, one of the biggest talking points among the fan base is going to be extending Riley Greene. So might as well get out ahead of it as far as I'm concerned. But I also understand he hasn't been healthy too terribly much, and you want him to prove that he can stay on the field. So we will see what happens with that. But I think in the calendar year, even if that is after the 2025 regular season, I think it is something that will become a very big talking point, and I would like to see happen. Another individual player that I think is worth taking a look at here is I really want to see Colt Keith take a big step forward this year. We kind of got a few glimpses. He had a really good, June or July in 2024, but was around a league average hitter most of the rest of the season outside of that 1 month hot stretch. This is going to be a really big year for him. And obviously part of that is just the natural progression of, like, we saw how good of a hitter he was down in the minor leagues. We saw how much of an offensive weapon he was when he was in the minors, and we are waiting for that kind of explosion and that switch to flip at the major league level, and for him to really be what was what we thought he was going to be. But it's a rookie. He's played one season. Like, he'll be fine. I still have a lot of confidence that he will be a great hitter at the major league level. But now you're throwing in the wrinkle of he's also going to play first base for the first time in his life. It's one thing for people to look at this and be like, oh yeah, like he'll make the adjustment wherever. I think he will. He's very athletic. He's a smart kid. Like, I really do think that he is going to be able to make this adjustment and be a fine defender at first base. I am not worried about it. But it's also very far from a gimme. It's very far from like, oh yeah, obviously he'll just do this. Like, he has played 0 games since being drafted at first base. And I can't imagine that he played a lot of first base growing up. Probably a lot of shortstop. He was the best player on probably every team he played for up until he was drafted. So I think it adds to the question of his development. I still expect him to take that step forward, but this is a big year for him. We need to see a step forward offensively, especially if he's going to be a first baseman. You need a lot more offensive production out of first base. But we also need to know that he's going to be sound defensively there. So really important year for Colt Keith. We'll talk about that a lot more as we get closer to spring training and whatnot. Like biggest storylines going into spring training, players to watch for it, etc. I think Colt Keith is honestly one of the biggest, I guess you could call it X factor, right? How broadcasts do, like, who's the X factor of the game? I think Colt Keith could be one of the biggest X factors of the Tigers season. Another thing I'm looking for and I'm hoping for in 2025 is a full season of what we saw from Parker Meadows in the second half. Superman, as we all call him on this program, he's the man. And if we can get 150 plus games of what we saw from him after coming back from injury and being recalled from the minors in 2024, if that's what we get for a full season in 25, this dude's going to be an all-star. He's going to fly up, like national pundits, talking about, the more valuable players in the sport. And he's absolutely going to take off and be this team's leadoff hitter going forward. Now, I'm not saying he needs to be that for every single, like in and out every day necessarily for all 162 games. I think that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid, but at a minimum, right? Like even if he's not hitting incredibly well for a few weeks at a time, you are getting elite base running and elite defense at a premier position up the middle. So like he really has that nice safety net of like, okay, well, even if I'm slumping for a little bit, now he can't hit, 090 like he did for the first month and a half of 2024. But man, I'm telling you, if we get what we got in the second half over a full season, we're talking about like a 4 or 5 win player, like legitimately. And that's unbelievably exciting. So really looking forward to what he can provide the Tigers in 2025. Other thing I want to see, and this kind of is a resolution from the Tigers' perspective, is like I want to see Jackson Jobe get a legitimate chance at the major league level this year. And I think that probably does happen. But I don't want it to be, like someone got hurt and we're just going to fill it with Jobe and then he gets sent back down to the minors and like whatever. Like I want him to carve a role out for himself on this team and kind of force the hand of the front office and of the coaching staff. And we look back in July and go, okay, like this is not just, we're penciling him in here and he's kind of like a swing man, bullpen, fifth man rotation, whatever. Like, no, this dude is just like part of the rotation going forward. And that's just that. That's my dream. But that starts with him just getting a legitimate chance to be on this roster in 2025. And I'm hoping the Tigers grant him that ability going into spring training. It sounds like they will. Most of the reports have been that they will, but I'm still going to put it on the list. That's something that I very much would like to see. Let's talk about the minor leagues for a little bit. There's like one specific, I guess it's kind of a general concept, but there's one thing specifically I want to see out of the minor league system. Then we'll jump back to the majors, talk about, the bullpen a little bit, the development of some young pieces, and then we'll end with free agency that we're currently in. We'll do all of that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a Tigers game, obviously. In 2024, the energy and excitement were absolutely unforgettable. Now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's awesome, and they have so many great features. Recently, I was looking for tickets for a Pistons game and used the Game Time app, and with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view of my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the cost total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. Talking about what we want to see from the Detroit Tigers organization in the year 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. You know, again, this is kind of a general thing, and my guess is that at the end of the year, we're going to look back and some will have this happen to them and some won't. But I really want to see the top prospects in this organization reach the upper levels of the minors. That's obviously Sans Jackson Jobe, who's going to be either in AAA or the majors to start off the year. But like a lot of the Tigers' top prospects are in the lower levels of the minors, right? We're talking single A, high single A, maybe a couple in double A, but like there was a weird transition period this year where double A had next to none of the top prospects because they were all either on the cusp of the majors or down in the lower levels. So like I want to see, and again, this will naturally happen to some and not all, right? Somebody will inevitably get hurt or struggle or something, but I'm really hoping that going into 2026, we are on here talking about how, you know, the next crop of Detroit Tigers prospects could potentially make their way into the majors this year, right? Talking about the 2026 season. And you have to lay the foundation for that, right? That only happens if they take steps forward and rise through the ranks this year. So it's kind of a long-term thing. And I know there's some impatience within the fan base and whatnot, but for prospects, this is kind of just how it works, especially when this organization has taken so many high school prospects. This is definitely how it works. I am just really hoping to see them kind of rise through the ranks. And hopefully, you know, at the end of the 2025 season, we're like, all right, a lot of these dudes are in double and triple A. That opens the door for them to be, you know, on the 40-man roster or even in the majors in 2026. And that would be really, really exciting. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for from the farm system this year. Back to the majors, you know, the bullpen hasn't been talked about as much as the rest of like the offense. We talk about Bregman every day. We talk about Santander all the time. We talked about Ha-Sung Kim several times. You know, like Sasaki even, right, starting pitching. Like we've talked a lot, but we as a show have talked multiple times about the bullpen, and we talked about the Kirby Yates thing and whatnot. I still really want them to go get Kirby Yates. I'm hoping that is still a true rumor and that the Tigers are legitimately interested in him because I think he fits into this bullpen beautifully. But I think just as a general concept, something I'm still waiting for to happen is a legitimate swing and miss threat, late inning swing and miss, high leverage situation threat out of this bullpen. And if it's not going to be via free agency, then it needs to be Alex Lange. And that's really all there is to it, right? Jackson Jobe is going to be a starter this year, and he should be. So and that's not to say that they don't have good relievers. They have had a really good bullpen this past year and have for spots of the last couple of years. But I think again, if you're not going to go spend money on a UFA to bring in and be that high strikeout, you know, swing and miss back end reliever, then Alex Lange better figure it out, because we cannot go into another season without a legitimate strikeout threat. I love Jason Foley more than anybody. Okay. I think I love him more than his parents do. You cannot keep putting a ground ball pitcher in Jason Foley out there with a man on third and one out in the ninth inning of a one-run game. You can't do it. It happened way too often. Did we need a strikeout and we had nobody else to go to? So it was just, all right, go out there, Foley, have fun. Need whiffs. So find a way to add that to your bullpen. I think this is the progression of the young core, which is also super general, and not 100% of these will continue. As we know, that's how baseball works. But like this team last year was so young, especially like the playoff roster was one of the youngest rosters, if not the youngest in baseball. right? So like I want to see another step forward from Riley Greene, from Reese Olson, Kerry Carpenter, Colt Keith, as we talked about earlier, Dylan Dingler, right? Trey Sweeney, Jace Young, Parker Meadows, we talked about earlier. And then even like some of the fringe guys, right? Like can Torkelson figure it out? Can Casey Mize be what was thought to be at one point? Matt Manning, same conversation. So this team was so young last year, and again, 100% isn't going to happen, obviously, but you just hope that a handful of those guys can keep their progression going and keep it linear and keep getting better and better. That's the hope. And so I am hoping that does happen for a decent amount of those players, man. Like imagine how different catcher looks if Dylan Dingler, figures out at the plate this year. That could be the difference of, a slightly below average Tigers offense to a legitimate league average. If him and Jake Rogers, Jake Rogers goes back to how he was hitting in 2023. So many question marks. Again, we'll talk way more in depth about all these guys as we get closer and closer to spring training. This is a really petty one, but fix the dang center field gap between the old center field wall and the new one. Jeez, dude, it's so ugly. And this has been something legitimately that I have been complaining about since they moved the walls in. The first day they moved, you can go find the episode. The first day they moved the walls in, I was like, I don't really care. Like, sure, it's going to give you some more home runs, but you're going to give out more homers. I'm fine with them moving the walls in a little bit. It was really fun. Like, I kind of liked it out at 420 or 423 or whatever it ended up exactly being. But like I liked it. I kind of liked the uniqueness of how deep Tigers center field was. But I wasn't like crying or freaking out when they moved the walls in. Sure, man, like whatever. You need good players before I'm going to get mad about the dimensions. But the one thing that I was pissed about was how awful it looked. And they were like, "Oh yeah, it's not a long-term option. We'll fix it eventually." When? It better be. Please fix it. It drives me nuts. Watching games and every ball hit to center field, there's 2 center field walls. It looks dreadful. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox, off my high horse here for a random, like nobody cares about it argument that I'm saying here. But like, it just drives me absolutely mad. What we'll end on is make a splash. I think that that's probably close to number one on almost everyone's list. I know some people are not as, gung-ho about you have to go get a big name or have to shovel over some money. But like, I think that would go a really long way. And it's almost as much about the talent and the production and the player you're bringing in as it is just the confidence that the fan base has that you are actually going to financially support and financially back your own team. And I think that you accomplish both of those things, bringing in a player like Bregman. Again, we've talked about Santander a lot. We've talked about Ha-Sung Kim a lot. Like there's plenty of players that are still out there in free agency, and we'll see what happens with the Tigers in this next month and a half. But I really do. That is very high on my list. Go get Bregman, man. Go bring in one of the best third basemen in baseball. If you are scared of the decline at the end of the contract, you are pretty much just never going to sign a free agent ever. Every team deals with it. Every team signs people knowing that is going to happen, and they all still do it because it's inevitable, and that shouldn't shy you away or steer you away from getting all-star caliber production for the next 4 years just because the last 2 suck. And so I'm hoping that happens. And the most recent update will end for real on this. Evan Petzold said that there was a little bit of a disagreement. Again, we've been talking about the financial disagreement for the while. The Tigers don't want to go over 200 mil, whatever. But now Petzold mentioned in his, I want to say it was his podcast, but sure, he's going to write about it as well, as he always does. That there also may be, not for sure, certain, definitely, but there may be a discrepancy over the Tigers wanting to give Bregman 5 years and Bregman wanting more like 6. Now, 1 year, we hope that that's ironed out and it doesn't cause him to, go somewhere else for like less money or something ridiculous. But I do think that I do hope rather that that is ironed out. And for the people that don't want him for a ton of years, that should be music to your ears. Okay. Well, I can live more with 5 than like 8, right? I don't necessarily want him for 8 either. Then you might be talking about half the contract being bad. But if it's the last year or two, I'll live with it if the next 4 years are solid production. Let's have a fun 2025. All right. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday recapping the weekend that is. I appreciate you all greatly for tuning in and continuing to support this show. As I said earlier, this June, I believe, will be 4 years as host of this program. I believe that makes me the longest tenured host in this show's history. I believe I've surpassed Castellani now. Yeah, man, appreciate all you. Appreciate Castellani for helping me get on here back in the day. I just appreciate all you for supporting the show. It means the absolute world to me, and I hope I make that clear as often as possible. All right, let's have a good 2025. Let's get back to the postseason. Let's sign some players. Let's call up some prospects. Let's get back to the glory days. Let's make the good old days again. All right, peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.